Cardi B just became the first female rapper with a #1 solo single with no features in 19 years. That's since Lauryn Hill in 1998. With her song Bodak Yellow, she is the 5th female rapper in history to have a #1 Billboard hit. But she isn't celebrated by all of hip-hop, as Twitter feuds started as hip-hop legends discussed how much they couldn't stand Cardi B's voice and flow, which is important in the world of hip-hop and language, as Cardi B sounds like this.
You sure can. Like, wow, you surprised.
Cardi B is Dominican and Trinidadian and grew up in the Bronx, New York. She has a classic Bronx, New York accent, big rounded vowels, a raspy yet high-pitched voice, and loud plosives. Those are T, K, P, D, G, and B sounds. Whereas the Italian Brooklyn accent on women is seen to be sexy, this accent is not, because this accent is held by people of color in the Bronx and Brooklyn, and became popular with the birth of hip-hop. It's this kind of accent that black women are made fun of for and misquoted for, and it has been associated as a sign of poor education. It's one of the calling cards of the racist welfare queen ideologies that arose in the 60s and then the 80s with Reaganism. But black women's voices and accents have always been under racist scrutiny for years. From minstrel shows in the 1920s to out-of-touch comedies now, black women's voices are ridiculed as not understandable, even if they're performing their own culture. Take R&B and hip-hop superstar Rihanna. As anyone who knows Rihanna's influence in music, she stays true to her very deep Barbadian roots. Being from the West Indies gives Rihanna an accent and a dialect known as patois. However, patois has always been seen as a pidgin English or a simplified form of English. But that's a myth, because there is no standard or correct form of English. West Indian patois is English touched by multiple European countries that had abused the Caribbean during slavery and the Africans who were kidnapped there. This critique of Rihanna and her accent is really interesting, as the American mainstream audience has heard male reggae voices such as Sean Paul and Bob Marley sing in patois. When a woman does it, as less female reggae artists are popular in America, it's seen as strange. Racist jokes such as the Ariana Grande joke on SNL is the tone-deaf kind of humor we make about Black history, because this is a reggae song sang by a West Indian singer in her own dialect. Rihanna's use of repetitive words and her sing-songy dialect are a reflection of reggae and soca music and even jazz, which are trends linked to African griots, the original storytellers, who are believed to be the birth of Black music. In 1937, during the Harlem Renaissance, Zora Neale Hurston wrote Their Eyes Are Watching God, and even though the novel is lauded in most college classrooms today, Hurston was very unpopular due to her critique by Black male writers in her time. She was critiqued for writing her characters with honest Southern dialect. Author Richard Wright wrote of her, "Miss Hurston voluntarily continues in her novel the tradition which is forced on the Negro in the theater, that is, the minstrel technique that makes white folks laugh." Zora Neale Hurston made her characters speak like Southern Black folk, sometimes even uneducated Southern Black folk, which dismissed them from the elite image of Black respectability male authors were looking for. Male Harlem Renaissancers were also not accepting of a feminist novel of a Black woman claiming her own power in her body, her sexuality, and her position in society. Her dialect was seen to make white folks see Black language as a joke, an idea we can still see today. What Zora, Cardi, and Rihanna have in common is the claiming of their own dialect, their pride of their language that has been perverted by white supremacy and misogyny to be negative. Black women's voices are constantly under scrutiny from the double burden of sexism and racism to be not feminine enough or white enough. Finding ways to sing, tell stories, and express themselves in their native dialect becomes hard when they feel like their words and what they're saying are being ridiculed. That takes a more heartbreaking turn when we see examples of this, such as the treatment of Rachel Jeantel during the trial of Trayvon Martin. Through soft delivery, guilt, and sadness over the murder of her friend, Rachel was deemed uneducated and couldn't be understood by the mainstream media that had never heard AAVE.
In other words, we have to excuse her poor manners her disrespectful language, and cocky ignorance because she's black? It's all part of the culture, William Raspberry called it once, the ghettoocracy. Left-wing elites fall all over themselves to avoid criticizing behavior among black youth that they would never tolerate from most upper-crust white kids.
I think she felt inadequate toward everyone because of her education and her communication skills. I just felt sadness for her.
You're uneducated. You have no communication skills. What do you feel about what that juror said about you?
Angry. Upset. And then the closing, when the state closed, they trying to explain what kind of person I am.
As blackness and black language become more visible, we can only hope that language can be understood for all people of color, and that there is no longer a standard or correct form of English. Proper English is a myth created by the highest class of racially and socially elite. Those who they oppress must aspire to conform to what they deem as proper. AAVE and Patois are dialects reserved for sharing messages to others in the culture and to subvert the white supremacist ways our ideas and language have been positioned and poisoned. For reading on this topic, I recommend Their Eyes Were Watching God. Read it in the way it was intended, passionately and personally, and notice how the language of the characters reflect on who they are. The story, based in the 20th century, is the tale of Janie, a woman sexually and mentally liberated, and attempts to retell her story in her own voice. Look past the Southern dialect and look deeper into the bravery, passion, and soul that are braided into those words.